Yeah, everybody, welcome to the episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 70. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. This week I have 11 new LitRPG reviews just for you folks at home. And that includes these titles: Grum, Barbarian Barista, a LitRPG short story. And then Null Protocol, a LitRPG Space Marine Adventure, Omicron Sector Book 2. After that will be The Harem Girl, a LitRPG Fantasy, a new complete edition. I'll explain what that means in the review. And then also Fragged 4. And then after that will be Zandaria, the group split book 2 of the LitRPG Zandaria series. And after that will be The Desperate Quest, an MMORPG and LitRPG online adventure. After that will be The Builder's Greed, the Legendary Builder book 2. After that, The Artificer, a Viridian Gate online novel, the Imperial Initiative DLC 1, long title. We'll explain what it means again during the review. After that will be Persephone Falling, the Persephone Saga book 1. After that, MOB, Mob Grind, Raid Online. And finally, Camelot Overthrown, an Arthurian LitRPG. So there we go. Some very fine, interesting titles. Some titles that we'll discuss about later. Okay, but first we're going to start us off with LitRPG news. Okay, and in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with the story that Michael Chatfield has changed the release date of Pantheon Moves, which is Emerald Book 10, to October the 24th. Sorry guys. It was originally scheduled to come out on October the 10th, 10/10 for Book 10, just like he had Book 9 come out on 9/9, and I assume he meant for Book 11 to come out on 11/11. It was been a thing for him, but he has pushed back Book 10 to October the 24th. That gives him 14 more days, couple weeks, to essentially catch all the spelling grammar errors, polish the thing up the way it should be. I think this is probably in response to some of the criticisms he got for Book 10 and even in Book 9, that the readers found an unusual number of spelling grammar errors, unusual for like a good series like this, I should say. In context of like overall novels I've ever read, really not that bad. But Michael Chatfield is a professional. He wants to put the best possible novel possible. And so, hey man, like if you need to take a couple weeks to get this to your standards that you feel you have, then the fans are more than happy to wait a couple extra weeks. I mean, you're still putting out a book a month, basically, as a LitRPG writer, and that's still amazeballs to me. So there you go. Okay. Also this week, Aloran Kong updated his fans with a live stream recently from his Facebook page. He just for some updates on things that are happening in the community, stuff with him. Starting off with Aloran has actually done a charity match through his LitRPG Patreon page and also through LitRPG.com. And he's helped raise, him and the community of LitRPG readers have raised over $5,000 so far this year for charity, including hurricane relief funds. Also, Aloran let people know that Nick Podell has a cold right now, and so he's paused in the recording for book 5, so it'll be delayed a little. Nick Podell is again professional. He wants to put a good product, so he's just not going to record when his voice isn't the best. It'll also create like some schisms in like what he recorded before and after the cold, so it's better that he not record actually at all. Book 7, according to Aloran Kong for the Cassie series, is huge, massive. It's thick and meaty and veiny, and it's going to satisfy everybody, I hope. But he's also looking to tie up some storylines in the series. And he basically said on the stream that the book's delayed because he took some time off. And he also works at night as an actual doctor. And so that does take up quite a bit of time. And also that he's also expanded into other things like the website, the merchandising, the going to cons and things like that as well. So that's also eating up some of his free time. But he said that he appreciates everyone being patient. He wants to get this thing out as soon as possible, but he also wants to make sure it's a good book. So there we go. Of course, during the stream, he also answered some live questions from the audience. So if you want to go check that out, we have a link in the show notes for you to go watch it. Okay, these are some stories that are out now, but I haven't had a chance to review them. They'll be coming up next week, hopefully, including An Adventurer's Heart Book 2, Adventures of Brad. That's the name of the, never mind. Also, The Star Dragon, a fantasy LitRPG, and The Alchemy Worlds, The Enter Therapy. There's some interesting typesetting there. I'm not sure what it means. I'll have to find out when I read it. Also, City of Champions Online, Issue 1, Origin Stories, and Shards of Reality, a LitRPG novel, Enter the Realm, Book 1. This one was actually supposed to come out, I think, last month, but the author got backed up on like some editing stuff with his editor, so it's out now, though. Okay, also in LitRPG audiobook, actually we have more audiobooks, I think, than new actual LitRPGs this week, so that's interesting. New audiobook LitRPG, The Dungeon Town, which is Slime Dungeon Chronicles Book 2, out for you. World Seed Expansion. I can't remember if that's Book 3, I think, in that series. I know the entire World Seed series is going to be made in audiobooks. The author, Sean Minimal, let me know that it's going to be the case, so the audiobook producers are going to get those out as soon as possible. But also out now is The Way the Clan Book 2, World of Eldiria. Also, A Healer's Gift, Adventures of Brad, Book 1. So the author has audiobook for Book 1, and he has the ebook version of Book 2 out for you right now. And then also War in the Greenwood from Galen Wolfe, another author whose book we're reviewing on the podcast this week, but his audiobook for another one of his series is available for you at home. Okay, next, upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read off the titles that are coming up in a couple months. Feel free to skip ahead, but there are some new additions to this list. Apocalypse 2020, a Wasteland LitRPG, out September the 25th. Also on the 25th of September, Starter Zone. On the 27th of September, The Laboratory, a futuristic dungeon core. The 28th of September, On the Lost Continent, Alter Game Book 2. 20th of September as well, Chronicles of a PC Gamer Stuck Inside of an RPG. 29th of September, Travail Online Transcend. That's Book 3 in that series. September 30th, rather, Alpha Company, Alpha World Book 3. Looking forward to that one. October the 4th, Desert Runner. On the 5th of October, Shadow of a Rogue. On the 6th of October, The Black Dragon, a fantasy LitRPG, Dragon Kings of the New World Book 2. The first book in this series is out now. That's on the other list I'm talking about. Then on October 11th, A Game with No Rules. This is Perimeter Defense Book 4. On October the 16th, Fantasy Online Polonia. This is Book 2 in this series. October the 26th as well, The Wizard Dungeon Core Book 1. On October the 20th, it'll be The Iron Dragons, a fantasy LitRPG. This is the Dragons King of New World Book 3. That's the same author I talked about a few seconds ago. 3 books coming out in September and October. So there. October the 23rd as well, Nemesis, the Pangardia Online Saga Book 1. On the 24th of October, rather, the Pantheon Moves Emerald Book 10. We just talked about that. November 1st, the Redeemer of the Dead, which is the System Apocalypse Book 1. The first book in the series would be A Life in the North, if you're familiar with that. On the 8th of November, Desert Born, Pateria Online Book 2. November the 16th, Shadowlands Book 3. Emerillia Book 11 will come out sometime in November. At this point, I don't have a firm release date from the author, so I'm just going to put November and question marks. Then, of course, December the 4th, The Twilight Obelisk, which is Mirror World Book 4. So there we go. Now on to new releases and reviews. On new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with Grum, Barbarian Barista, a LitRPG short story written by John Rickett. This one is 48 pages, 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, full disclosure, I got an advance copy for review. I purchased the short story when it became available, so I actually really enjoyed it. I'm not going to read the author's description because it's a little wordy. This is a reverse transportation to an RPG world. So instead of a normal person like me going to a fantasy RPG world, in this case, someone from that world has come here. So there you go. Grum is the main character. He's a level 99 barbarian with super maxed out legendary gear. He's transported to our world after a nasty battle with an evil mage. He thinks a help wanted sign outside of a coffee shop is a quest marker and ends up applying for a job as a barista. Can Grum use his RPG-based view to master the intricacies of the job, or will he forever remain a level 1 barista? So this is a comedy. This is definitely humor, satire. It's really short, so I can't go into details about too much of it, but the gamer jokes are very funny, and especially if you're a fan of the LitRPG community, like these jokes are going to land hopefully for you. They definitely made me giggle and chuckle as I'm reading the story and kind of snort out loud. It's very humorous. I had a really good time reading it. The humor does rely on the stranger in a strange land type of setup. Think of like Mork and Mindy or Perfect Strangers as examples of this kind of foreigner-based humor, where everything is filtered through the cultural perspective of the foreigner, and that's what makes it funny to the reader. In this case, that foreigner is someone from an RPG world who sees things in terms of levels, skills, dialogue trees, and he thinks of his fellow employees as NPCs. Again, lots of gamer jokes. They're not super explained. They're not like dumbed down or anything. The author does assume that you're a gamer or that you played RPGs, so just be aware of that going into this. If you've ever seen the live action animated version of Son of Zorn, you're kind of, you know what kind of humor this is going to be like. So just, if you like that show, you're probably like this as well. But again, I think the author did a really good job of keeping this story tight and clean, because that kind of humor can get boring fast or get kind of old really quickly, but this was done well. It was done with finesse, and the story is just long enough that it's interesting without getting repetitive. So I had a really good time reading it. Gets a score of 8 out of 10 from me. So I really thought it was actually rather great. So there you go. Okay, on to next story, Null Protocol. LitRPG Space Marine Adventure, Omicron Sector Book 2. This one's also a short story. It is 76 pages, 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Again, another short story. Very nicely priced. I also got this as an advanced copy from the author, but it was like the same day he put it out, so I don't feel like too big of a disclosure because I just bought it. I had already pre-ordered it, or I purchased it. So this is the second book in the series. In book 1, it was essentially revealed, if you don't want to spoil it for book 1, another short story, a group of Space Marines playing an MMO, basically. They go in together as a group, looking for some core cash because they pay their bills with actual game money. And they took a quest to go explore a space station and rescue the scientists who were there who haven't communicated with the Space Marine government. When they get there, bad stuff happens, like aliens galore, monsters, and it looks like the crew of that spaceship got infected by some alien virus and were transformed. And the slight plot twist at the end was that one of the players also got infected, and it stopped him from logging out. So he's like stuck in the game, but also slowly becoming one of like the alien host. And so that was kind of a cool twist for that short story. Book 2 picks up right after the end of book 1, where they're fleeing the space with their infected crew member and trying to find some way to save him and to keep him healthy. And they try to turn in the quest that they got, but they're refused entry. And apparently, like, the main station they use is refusing entry for everybody. And it turns out that this is a much bigger problem than just the space station. And from there, unfortunately, it kind of drops off on like that main story point line for me, unfortunately. It turns out that there's an impromptu space station that's taking these kind of victims and trying to help them medically. And so, of course, the crew, who's loyal to each other, Space Marines and gamers, they go to the space station. They essentially drop off their wounded teammate who's infected, and you don't see him again until the end of the story. Instead, the crew goes and takes a mission. It's very lucrative because it's not within the government Marine Corps thing going on, to help some farmers who also may be having issues with like infected stuff. And so they go there. There's a bunch of like murder, killing stuff, and that's what this really is. It's an action adventure story. And that's like 90% of the story, essentially. Murder stuff, murder aliens, kill stuff. There is a cool space battle scene in here that I thought was neat. But I did not enjoy it as much as book 1, mostly because that cool thread of like the alien infection preventing like actual players from logging into the game, like what's happening. That is not the main focus of the story. It's a minor thread that kind of comes back at the end of the story. Like there's like little plot twist there that it's neat. But again, it just wasn't as good to me as book 1, unfortunately. Again, overall, good action story. It just wasn't as good as book 1. So it gets a score of 6 out of 10 from me. So there you go. Hopefully book 3 will be better. And our next story is going to be the Harem Girl LitRPG Fantasy, a new complete edition. This one is 122 pages. It is 99 cents and available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm going to read you the author's description of the story. Thousands of years ago, a race of ancient beings called the Game Masters came to Earth. They built a worldwide crystalline computer network. Its purpose to test humanity's mettle using VR MMO style games. The centuries later, college girl Amy Prescott accidentally awakened the long slumbering network. Now trapped in a VR simulation based on her fangirl fantasies, there appears to be no way out. Amy soon finds herself traded to the half-orc Bashir as his reluctant concubine. Stuck as a character with a high sex appeal but little defense seems more than unfair. Amy must learn to master the secret skills she needs to survive. Okay, again, this is 120 pages, 99 cents, available on Kindle Unlimited. This book actually had a pretty rather large change of format. Originally, it was split up into 3 different short stories. In the space of a week, the author combined the 3 into a single story and deleted the serial aspect to the series. So it's a little bit longer. Basically the same price. Like essentially the other one, the first one was free, and then books 2 and 3 were like 99 cents each. So it very much was along that serial model. And so this, I'm not sure why the author did it. Yeah, she also changed the cover art on the novel for whatever reason. I actually like the other cover art better, but that's author's prerogative. The novella starts off with a really graphic sex scene. Just overall, though, there is not a lot of sex in the story. Something around 7-8% of the actual novel has sex scenes in it, but it is still there. So if that's not a thing you're interested in, or does anything for you, then just pass this one along. But if you happen to like stories with romance and LitRPG, this might be something you're actually going to be interested in. So the first question on this one, especially when there is like sex and romance involved, is it actually a LitRPG? There's been a slew of romance authors and authors just authors who are trying to write LitRPG stories without really understanding what the community is looking for. And their stories have very much not been LitRPG. I'm happy to say that this one actually is. The LitRPG mechanics are kind of loose, but they're consistent at least. There are stats, there's a character sheet, there are game missions, and the use of class skills eventually. Remember, this is actually 3 short stories kind of mushed together. The main character, Amy Arwen's her game name, is transported to a game world where she eventually uses her vast gamer knowledge to find a place for herself in that VR simulation. I'd say this is honestly the first example of an actually successful LitRPG romance. There's, again, also like a bit of erotic fiction in there. Again, less than 7%. It's essentially like 3 scenes that are like a couple pages long, but they're very easy to skip over. And like I said, they're like, it starts off with a graphic sex scene though. So that's going to put some people off, but you can really skip to like the 4% mark on this novel and you're not really going to lose anything. Again, the emphasis on this novel is romance though. It's not on sex. It's not on action. There's only a couple action scenes in here. It's actually a romance novel that happens to take place in a virtual reality game, and there are RPG elements in there. So I thought that was kind of cool that this was actually a romance novel. If you like paranormal romance stories and LitRPG, you might want to give this a try. You might actually I would love to hear somebody's take on somebody who actually loves paranormal romance and LitRPG to see if this works for them or not, because the paranormal romance stuff is not really my thing. But the LitRPG stuff, I'm like, oh, this was kind of neat. Personally, I skipped the sex scenes, and the romance stuff was, again, only okay for me. It's not really my genre, but I did recognize the romance novel pattern in here. Reluctant attraction turns into passion, which blossoms into a love so strong the main character is willing to risk all she has to save the man she loves. And like, even to me, like a goofy guy, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute. And I kind of couldn't help but root for the main character as she grappled with her emotions and fought for her life in like the couple of like fight scenes in the novella. And honestly, this novel was well on its way to like being a 7 out of 10, like actually being good, until you hit the last 15%. And then the story kind of takes a weird pseudo sci-fi twist. That tries to force the main character back into the simulation to save everyone with her feelings. So I'm like, oh, that's a choice there. And it kind of dropped the appreciation level of the novel for me a little bit. But again, it has a good traditional romance ending. The main character and her love interest totally end up together, so that does follow the romance formula. So, but for me, it was almost a 7 out of 10, but it ended being a 6 out of 10. So it gets its final score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, Fragged 4, a LitRPG short story series written by Zachariah Dracolius. This is another short story here. It is 99 cents, 54 pages. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Long and short of this one is that the author in the foreword to the novel kind of admits that Fragged 3, which is the one that came before this, got a little too long, and he decided to split into Fragged 3 and 4. And I think the readers could tell, because I think I'm even remember mentioning something when I reviewed Fragged, like, this kind of ends abruptly. It feels like it was like half of a story. And it turns out I was right. I'm like, oh, okay. And that kind of explains some of the ways that the novel ended up progressing. In this particular story, there's not a ton that actually happens to move any kind of plot forward. It really is just fighting. A few skills go up. A new player joins Zoe's group after a fight with some muties. Overall, the story was just kind of, okay, meh. I'm hoping that the next episode is a little more interesting because the main group, Zoe's group, is actually going to hopefully, I think, be attacked. That's what's being hinted at the end of this novel by a larger player group. So hopefully we'll see some more RPG goodness and more than just like a couple combat skills going up. But for now, it was very messed story. It got scores 5 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, next one. I think it hits the novella range on this one. It is Zandaria, the group split, book 2 of the LitRPG Zandaria series. This one is 124 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, I'll read you the author's description. The tournament for $100,000 is just a few days away. After reaching the level 5 milestone, the friends must find a way to reach level 10 in time to compete for the money. Tension is running high for at least one of the players, especially after they have an unfortunate run-in with a professional gaming team looking for some extra gold. On top of this, a mysterious third party known as Southern Belle has appeared. Join Mark and Alan as they run into a witch with disturbing appetites, help a strangely masked doctor, and search for the final ingredient in an insane wizard's concoction in the Zandaria LitRPG series, book 2. Okay, this one's slightly higher than I would normally pay, but it's also on Kindle Unlimited, so trade-offs. This is the first novel I really enjoyed. It was very humor-based, very witty banter stuff between the characters, but it was mostly kind of like a clean version of Critical Failures, which I appreciated because not everybody likes the cursey potty mouth comedy stylings of that series, which is cool. And I think this was like a really good alternative. Book 2 kind of takes a step down from that, though. I mean, it's still good and everything, but this group splits up, so you lose your group dynamics very early on in this novel. And instead of becoming like one novel about 4 people in a group adventuring and having fun and a humor stuff happening. Instead, you have 2 groups of 2. You have Alan and Evie, and then you have Mark and Trevor. They are 2 groups. You just at some point, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but they split off and they go in essentially 2 different lines of adventuring that eventually meet up back at the end. But that's all it really is these 2 groups going on adventures, killing stuff, getting levels, equipment, items, gold. Because they still have to get level 10 before the end of the novel. Otherwise, they won't qualify for that $100,000 competition, which is supposed to be occurring in book 3, apparently. You can honestly skip this entire novel and not really lose anything. But there are like a few social threads, and that they're supposed to appreciate the other group's good qualities and bad qualities, and even them mad at each other. By the end of the story, they're hopefully going to be friends again, and that's all this really is. It's not like super amazing, but it's also still kind of funny and entertaining. Just not as entertaining as book 1 to me, but it still gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me, so I enjoyed it. Okay, next it is The Desperate Quest, a MMORPG and LitRPG online adventure, second age of Retha book 2, written by A.M. Soma. Okay. This one's 307 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Chronicles of Retha was meant to be a full submersion video game filled with adventure and magic, but it has become a prison. Kit and her party of misfit players have managed to collect 2 of the 4 seals that are required to face Malingus, Retha's ultimate villain, whose defeat may be the only way out of the game. Unfortunately for Kit, who is stuck playing as a defective elf dancer, the quest only becomes more difficult. The remaining seals are hidden in areas of Retha that Kit and her low-level party can't get through. Even worse, they will need to unite other players in guilds to face Malingus, an unlikely event, as riots have spread across the game world. Unwilling to give up, Kit and her party band together with Solus Miles, one of the best players in the game, and throw everything they have against Malingus. So there you go. Okay, book 1, I didn't give a particularly good score to, mostly because it took the Sword Art Online premise and didn't follow through with like any real stakes in the game. Like essentially the entire first novel, and even this one I guess technically, could have been solved by them just doing nothing and waiting for the game company to figure out the problem, which they would eventually do, I guess. Except that the author has other plot ideas for the story. But in book 1, the main character, who has basically a messed up character that her cousin forced her to play, tricked her basically. I won't go into details about it. It's kind of lame. You can read that review at our website. She has a small bit of negative information that even though everyone is trapped in the game, she can get out if she beats this one unbeaten, boss who's never been beaten in the entire history of the game. So if she, it's an automatic logout for that entire group, which will kick them out of the game they're stuck in. I know it doesn't really make sense to me either, but that's the plot, which is kind of one of the flaws in that. Like, if the game can kick them out, why can't the developers use that same mechanic and just, enter some code and bam, auto-kick everyone out? I mean, like I said, there are flaws. But the biggest issue I have with book 2 in this particular series is that it kind of makes a lot of the same mistakes that book 1 did. And with the exception of like the very last boss fight in this novel, which is like 80 to 90% mark, it's kind of a repetition of book 1. The main characters get 2 seals, then a big boss fight, and that's exactly what happened in book 1. So there's not a lot of change and variety. Like the details of getting the seals is different. I'm not saying it's an exact copy. Like the overall plot is not, it's nothing new, especially compared to like the book that came out before. And again, the goal of the novel in this particular one is to collect the last 2 seals that allow for the big boss fight, and that will auto-log the group of, thus saving them from being trapped in the game. However, again, like I had an issue with in book 1, it's not the main characters group that actually gets these seals, but another summoned character, the Solus character, who she just happened to have kind of gotten married to in book 1. And I never really understand the mechanic. Like, why is this thread here? Like, I get that it's kind of funny and interesting and it's goofy and there might be some romance there. But the fact that he's also kind of used as this knight in shining armor to save the main character and her group never really made sense to me. And it also kind of bugged me that the game mechanics in the story, where it's like a futuristic full immersion game, are still using like this really out-of-date progression system that forces abilities and skills on players as they level, instead of giving the players the freedom of choice to how to build their characters. So essentially, as the characters level, they get new abilities, and no 2 characters are supposed to get the exact same abilities. The computer decides what skills they get according to their class and their playstyle. And that always felt weird to me, in that you take away freedom from the characters in that respect. And that's still here, which is why it still bugs me. The last boss fight, again, is legitimately good. It's well thought out, and the main character actually sort of defeats the big boss. Even though it's actual other forces that do the actual killing, I'm like, the main character is still responsible for the downfall of the boss. So I like that portion of it. That was definitely an improvement from book 1. There's also less level skipping in the novel. So instead of, like, this happened a lot in book 1, where the main character would like say, oh, we're going to go grind up some levels, and then magically, in like a sentence, going from level 5 to level 11 without any real details to show for it. And in this novel, at least the grinding is sort of summarized, at least. And so even though the characters still gain levels at a particularly good rate, the details of that grind exist here. And that to me is an improvement, because that grinding experience is a part of every MMO player's gaming experience. And so the fact that it was excluded from book 1 kind of eliminated some of the relatability that readers could have had, and that exists here. So I'm happy to see that does exist. What kind of really threw me for a loop was just some of those romance characters. And I bring this up because I was reading the reviews on the novel, and I noticed like it gets a lot of good reviews, like 40 like 30, 45 4-star reviews for book one. I'm like, and I started to question myself thinking, am I just off base about this novel? Is it a lot better than I think it is? And then I actually started to read the reviews, and a lot of them were like, oh, if you like K.M. Shia's novels, you're going to like this too. Or it was being reviewed by people who are interested in romance and young adult fiction. And I'm like, this seems odd. Or like some of the reviews were like, I'm not a gamer, but I really like this novel. Or I'm a gamer and I've never read this kind of book before. But what they kept repeating was like, oh, if you like K.M. Shia, you're going to like this story too. Don't worry about it. And I had to think about like, is that the author of this novel? Like, and I had to look up, like, no, it's A.M. Soma. I'm like, and then I realized that this is just a pen name for that author, of K.M. Shia, who writes like fantasy romance novels. And if that was true, I mean, it took like 2 seconds to do a blog search and to realize, oh yeah, they're same author, basically. But it made this novel make so much more sense. Like, oh, I get it. The author is appealing to an established reader base who may not be gamers and who may not like a lot of game detail stuff. And she's trying to get them into, LitRPG stuff and also appeal to this LitRPG community. So it started to make more sense why the author chose to do some things in the novel that she did, including like a lack of actual detailed game mechanics, or that whole thing with like accidentally bonding marriage-wise to another character with her main character. And like that, it makes more sense to my brain now. So I get what the author's doing, and I totally appreciate it more, because obviously she's pulling in mechanics and story ideas that are not generally seen in a lot of LitRPG stories, but are very successful for her current readers as K.M. Shia. So it makes sense there. But for me, as a LitRPG guy who's more used to action adventure stuff, like that, those choices also kind of drop the appreciation or the enjoyment level for me. So it's an author choice. I don't, it's her thing. I don't say it's bad in any way, shape, or form. It's just those choices made the novel less enjoyable for me, unfortunately. Again, this is not a bad novel. It is good story writing. But again, I kind of felt like book two is repeating the formula of book one in a lot of ways. And one great fight scene at the end doesn't make up for that repetitiveness. It is a really good fight scene. It is interesting, but it doesn't make up for it. I think one of the last lines in the book summarizes how I felt reading a lot of the novel. Again, this is from the author's actual book, with the main character speaking. It's time to do the same thing again, only this time it'll be even harder. And so that's how I felt a lot of this race. So for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to The Builder's Greed, a Legendary Builder Book 2. This one was written by J.A. Cipriano. Okay, this one is 270 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Excuse me. Let's see. I will read you the author's description. For the first time in millennia, the all-consuming darkness has been pushed back. Thanks to Arthur and his ragtag army of women, there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel. Or there would have been if Mammon, the princess of greed, hadn't awakened. Powerful enough to level a town in the blink of an eye, an ally to no one, Mammon has one goal and one goal only: to own everything in hell, starting with Arthur and his friends. And if you can't stop her from taking over while fending off attacks from Hell's ruling class, well, let's just say that his chance to stop the darkness will slip from slim to none. Okay, again, 270 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. This is about double what I normally pay for a novel. I usually go for about 10 cents per page of when I'm buying things, but it's also on Kindle Unlimited, so be aware of that. To me, this novel felt like a reset book. This happens sometimes. When your main character in the story becomes like super powerful, maybe a little OP, overpowered, and he kind of fixes everything he needed to in the first book. How do you keep the story interesting and to keep it going where there's actual character progression? So, well, you reset his powers and his resources. You kind of do a reset on the novel or in the series, and that's what this is. This is a huge reset button. The author takes away just about everything that Arthur Curry, the main character, earned in the first book. He uses the premise of Mammoth, a demon princess of greed, who's accidentally released from her captivity by the uber kind of dumb blonde girl, Archangel Gabriella. And she wants everything the main character has. And she, and that's the pretext that the author uses to take away the towns he's collected, the resources, the crafters, all the town building stuff that was established in book 1. All that is stripped away from him and more. And so the main character has to start over again. Started out from scratch with just the couple women who swore an oath to follow him. There are a few new upgrades for the main character. So instead of just having the sword, he also learns that there are armaments that will augment his power if he can find or make them. And so that's kind of the premise of like this book and the other series in the book, I assume, is in each book he's going to get a new armament and a new demoness who's going to help him learn something or change him in some way so he can finally face like the big bad darkness. But again, it's just a kind of a way to reset the novel and to extend it out. And that's what this kind of feels like. It feels like the author had a good success with book 1, probably better than he thought he would. And he wants to capitalize it. And so now he has 6 new things for the main character to collect in the next few books and 6 new demons to, kind of defeat or win over whatever happens. Which is not bad. It is. And so it's just a story choice. And again, it doesn't end up being a bad story at all. But it is kind of an excuse to reset the story. In this novel, there's a huge section in the middle, like 30% of the novel, that's just devoted to one particular pottery sculpting scene. And it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's kind of, when you read it, you're going to like, oh, it either works for you or doesn't. You think it's fun or you think it's boring. That's kind of what it's going to come down to. For me, I thought it was fine. It was fun. I get that it was interesting. And there's kind of a thing there, though. It's a sculpture contest that's run like a reality TV show competition. So it's like, oh, you've been dropped, like to the people who lose the contest. And so it's very humorous. And there is some character development there, but it's not for anybody who's like majored at the plotline. So it kind of sits there in the middle, and you're like, does this matter? And the ultimate answer is kind of no, because there's some crashing stuff involved, but again, it really doesn't matter. From the 63% mark on, the story actually does get good. I love the training that the main character does in the story. It finally feels like he's actually earning his power instead of just having it handed to him by somebody giving him a magic sword. And there are some nice revelations and twists and plot twists that happen one after another until like the very last moment. So like really, I thought like, oh, this is the last plot twist. And then a few pages later, oh, another one. And a few pages later, like another one. I'm like, this is a lot of twists. And then like another one at like the very end. And I'm like, for some people, it's going to get annoying. And the novel does end on kind of a cliffhanger. But for me, I liked that section of the story from 63 to like 100% because it finally had stuff that was happening, and it kind of made me feel like, oh, the main character is earning his power and he's becoming powerful on his own instead of relying upon either the people who he's upgrading or the magic sword that gives him superpowers. So overall, nothing really bad about the story, but you can actually skip. If you read the first 16% of the novel and then skip all the way to 63, you're not going to really miss anything that important. And if you're tight on time, that's a choice. And again, it'll still be good for you. And for me, that last 30% of the novel is kind of good on its own, just as a reason to pick up the story, because it is rather enjoyable and kind of a page turner for me. So for me, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. I had a good time. So there we go. Okay, on to The Artificer, a Viridian Gate online novel, the Imperial Imperative DLC 1, written by J.A. Hunter and co-authored by S.R. Witt. So there you go. It's going to be a buddy writing system. So there you go. Okay. This one is 355 pages. It's $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, just to let you know, this is essentially a side story in the Viridian Gate Online series. It's about the bad guy in the novel. And this is apparently supposed to be the first episode in kind of a parallel series where you're getting the bad guy's story, and then he's going to obviously switch back to the original VGO storyline, and they're going to kind of run parallel or like just slightly behind one another. I liked it, so that's always good. Okay, I'll read you the author's description. 2 weeks, the world will die, murdered by a 9-mile-wide extinction-level asteroid. And Robert Osmark, the billionaire and savvy tech genius, couldn't be readier for the fiery apocalypse. Unlike these short-sighted masses, he's been diligently preparing for this day from the moment the asteroid first appeared. Through his relentless efforts, digital salvation now awaits anyone bold enough to take a leap. I'll skip this. It's really long, and if you read VGO 1, then you already kind of know what's happening. Basically, Robert Osmark took a bunch of money from some super shady people and resources to kind of get this virtual reality afterlife or life set up into play. The big plan was that rich people and a certain portion of the population of the world are going to log into this game and stay there instead of living, kind of their minds kind of uploaded there to live there in this game for the rest of humanity's existence, because the Earth is going to be destroyed, like the surface level, by an asteroid. Okay, and so that's kind of what the story is. Again, 355 pages, $4.09, so pretty spot on price, available on Kindle Limited. I do have to disclose the author gave me an advance copy for review. I purchased the novel when it became available, though. So if you read Reading It Online, you know who the bad guy is in that. It's going to be Osmark. He's the antagonist in the story. And what this novel essentially is how he became a villain. Because nobody starts out evil. Nobody starts out doing evil things or bad things. It's usually a gradual progression of tiny evils to big and slightly bigger evils and bigger bad things until you're the, devil or whatever it's going to be. And you kind of get that story here. And it's an enjoyable story for me. And you don't actually have to have read VGO at all. You can skip that entire series and still read this. It gives you enough backstory so that it's an independent story. So even if you haven't read Video Game Online, you can still read this, and it's an enjoyable series, which is what I'd almost say. It's in the novel's timeline. It starts out right before a few weeks before the comet hits, and then it continues right up until the point where the main character in Video Game Online gets his faction seal. So if you're familiar with our first story, you kind of know what the timeline is for this novel. But if you haven't read Reading It Online, it's cool. This is just a novel. So, okay, there are no crossovers from the main character and this one yet. So this, again, it's just completely standalone. Again, it focuses on Osmark and his efforts to consolidate power in the virtual world his company has created. Again, he has to deal with some of the most ruthless political and criminal figures in the world. And one of these members is even plotting to take the reins of power from Osmark. So Osmark has to use his superior intelligence to deal with the political intrigue, but also to enact his own plan to get the unique and difficult class of the Artificer, which is the name of the title of the novel. He also has to retrieve his faction seal and figure out some way to deal with the group of assassins that keeps trying to murder him. So there you go. Again, I like the novel. The main character, Osmark, is super intelligent. He's a min-maxer kind of player, and so I definitely related with that kind of play style, because that's the kind of player I am generally. I like to maximize my benefits, and even at the cost of like some of my other stats. That's definitely my play style. Also, the class that the Osmark is going for, the Artificer, it's a crafting class, and so I'm totally into that as well. There's plenty of crafting, there's plenty of action, there's even some dungeon diving. And even though the novel ends with Osmark getting some overpowered abilities that kind of magic wand away his problems, it's still okay. I mean, it was still an enjoyable novel and story rather. If you like crafting, if you like min-maxing, if you like some steampunk themed fights, then you're going to really like this story. For me, I had a good time reading it. You get to score 7 out of 10. Okay, next, Persephone Falling, Persephone Saga, Book 1, written by Skylar Grant. Real big fan of his other series, which I'll get into in a second. Okay, this is 289 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. Persephone is falling. Falling from a life among the corporate elite, falling into a life ruled by cruelty and violence. Persephone led the perfect life. A noble scion of the Olympus Corporation, living a pampered existence in the center of art and culture of the orbital colonies. Then it all came tumbling down around her. Life on Earth is a struggle against a dying world that most escape via elaborate games in the network. The virtual world evolved from the internet. For them, the virtual is better than the real. But power has its privileges even in the virtual space. People are being trapped within the network, unable to leave, subject to whatever depredations the wealthy make them suffer over and over again. When there are fates far worse than death, how far can you fall before hitting the bottom? So this is actually a very interesting novel, but it is not LitRPG, which is kind of the summation of the actual review. There is a VR simulation aspect. Unfortunately, outside of like the very first glimpse into this world, there are really no game mechanics either. There are exactly 2 instances of character sheets in the entire 289 pages. There's also a handful of sentences relating to like Greek god powers that the main character has while in the VR network, but that's kind of it. The story is very much sci-fi cyberpunk. And I actually do like the story, but it's not LitRPG. And you could tell from the last few novels in the Crucible Shard series, which is the author's other series that is LitRPG, that this is kind of where this writing was heading, because that's like a 7-book series, I believe, and like the last 4 or 5 novels in that series, or like 3 or 4 novels in that series, started getting weird. I mean, not weird, but like interesting. Where like he started going from like the standard deviation plan of like, oh, players stuck in a game, to like time travel and parallel universes and a bunch of pulling game mechanics from other stories and like multi-planal universes where he can kind of do whatever he wants as far as the story goes. And it started getting very sci-fi in like his storytelling. And so this novel totally makes sense. And in that it's an extension of the author's exploration of what he enjoys writing. And that's totally cool, but it's still not RPG. And even the author at the end of his novel acknowledges, he says, I hope you had a good time reading this. It's his first effort at cyberpunk. And so that's what this is. This is, while it's an interesting story, again, it's not LitRPG. He's not going to get like a bad review course from me because he's not advertising as LitRPG actively. It's not like it's called Persephone Falling, the LitRPG adventure of a lifetime. It's just Persephone Falling. So, you know, I'm not going to ding the guy for it. It's kind of on me. And that I kind of assumed it was a LitRPG story because that's all he'd ever written before. It is what it is. So there you go. But if you like Skylar Grant, if you like his novels, you might enjoy the cyberpunk version of it. It's, again, fairly intriguing story, but just not LitRPG. So there you go. Okay, next one, Mob, M-O-B, Grind, Raid Online. So Mob Grind, Raid Online, a LitRPG fantasy standalone adventure. So this one actually says it's a LitRPG fantasy adventure. It is written by Isaac Stone and Timothy Mayer. Okay, this one's 370 pages, $4.99. That is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Enil is one of the most fierce and noble warrior gamers in the full immersion MMORPG known as Raid Online, developed by the government of a post-apocalyptic bunker society to keep the population entertained as they hide away from the polluted surface world. With his warhammer and his wolf, he has earned himself fame and fortune in this grim dystopia, all to help his invalid sister fight off a crippling disease. Enil must lead his adventuring party into a new game expansion that promises glory and rewards enough for the group to buy their way out of the slums and into the higher levels of bunker living. As they fight their way through mysteries and monsters, they must come to terms with deadly demons, treacherous competitors, and the challenge of the game scenario that is more savage than they could have possibly imagined. So that's the author's description. Again, 370 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. This is a series from the authors of the Wolf Mountain series and the Adventures Online series, a trilogy that advertised their novels as LitRPG, but weren't at all. Not at all. No, they were essentially VR adventure stories, but there were no game mechanics in those novels. And I'll admit I might be slightly biased with this particular series, but I started reading this very cautiously because I paid hard cash for those other novels in that other series, and I got burned because they said they're LitRPG and they weren't. And that's actually the case in this one too. The author's note at the bottom of their description is that this novel is soft LitRPG. And it's not LitRPG at all. For it to be RPG, LitRPG, you actually need RPG game mechanics in the story, and this doesn't have them. Again, there is a VR game system in there. I'm not saying there's not, but it's set up in like ancient Sumeria. So there's like a lot of sword and sorcery stuff. Like, there are some magic spells, but it's very reading from a scroll or saying magical words and, axes and, swords and like barbarian stuff, killing monsters and demons. But as far as like actual game mechanics, nope, sorry. The only thing kind of comes close is a vaguely described point system that I'm not really sure what it's supposed to do, but it's supposed to work as in the game players get them from collecting treasures, but also from killing monsters. And at the same time, it's used to upgrade the character, but also to buy real world rations. And that's about as much explanation as you can get. And even in that respect, it's not really consistent because later in the novel, the players use gold and silver to pay for game stuff. So it's not like it's like the points are like an overall currency in game and out even. So it's not consistent. And again, that's kind of the extent of the game system and like the game mechanics. There are mentions of levels, but no actual like descriptions of like people leveling. There are mentions of upgrades. No actual upgrades ever happen in this novel. And so for me, I'm like, as far as I can tell, the game stuff is just a simulation. People are in a VR simulation where they're being barbarians or whatever, but there are no RPG mechanics. And it's kind of the same issue I had with the Wolf Mountain Adventure Online series that these same authors did before. And overall, between those two series, it just kind of feels like the authors, while they're not bad storytellers, they don't really want to take the time to create actual RPG mechanics for their LitRPG series. They don't want to make the RPG stuff for LitRPG. And that honestly kind of bugs me because, again, I'm like, I don't really care about the money personally. But there are other readers out there who sees a novel titled LitRPG and they pay their hard-earned cash and they're on Kindle Unlimited. And when there is no LitRPG in the novel, they're out their cash. You know what I mean? And so that always kind of bugs me when this occurs. For me, it gets a score of 4 out of 10. And I kind of decided that after being burned by 3 of their novels, I'm not really going to review these particular authors' books unless somebody tells me that, oh, this is improved, like this is an actual RPG story. So there we go. That's my score for this particular novel, 4 out of 10. Okay, last on the list is Camelot Overthrown, Arthurian lit RPG adventure written by Galen Wolfe. He's also the author of the Greenwood series, one of which is the audiobook I talked about earlier. It's available now. Actually, a really enjoyable series. It is 254 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. Britain is threatened by the minions of the evil Satanists, and King Arthur calls out for brave knights to come and defeat him. Join Garrow as he rises up from level 1, hones his knightly skills, upgrades his weapons, makes friends, and builds a village on his way from squire to knight. As he levels, his progress is threatened by the ever-encroaching armies of Satanists, who threatens even Camelot itself. Garrow must race to improve himself so he has the skills to aid King Arthur's armies in their fight to defeat evil, and at the same time he needs to build and protect his settlement. In the last days, King Arthur sends out a call. If Camelot falls, surely the whole kingdom will too. Then who will resist Satanists and his black tide threatens to overwhelm the medieval island of Britain? So their author's description. And for the most part, that's actually exactly what this novel is. The author has described very succinctly the entire novel in like a few sentences. So good for him. Galen Wolfe is a really good author. I've enjoyed his, Greenwood series, which is a series not just novels, but also really funny and entertaining LitRPG short stories. So I encourage you to go check that out. I do need to make you aware, though, that in some of the reviews for the novel, other reviewers have noted that there are an unusual number of spelling errors in this particular one, as well as gender inconsistencies for the owls, or like he's and she's are switched up or interchanged a lot for the owl. And I don't particularly remember noticing too many of those. But if you're the kind of person that where these things stand out for you, it might bother you. So I'm just letting you know as an FYI. Okay. I would say, especially in comparison to the last review I gave, this one was super LitRPG. I mean, within the first few pages of this novel, I understood more about the game mechanics of this novel than I did in the entire novel, in the entirety of the last novel. So this is totally LitRPG. Don't have to worry about that. And this is super crunchy. There's lots of information about how skill mechanics work, how combat works, how crafting works, and literally within the first few pages, because the novel just drops you in to where Garrow is making his first character, and he has an owl companion, a barn owl, who talks to him as like a game guide, who's describing everything to him, kind of like Archimedes from the Sword in the Stone animated movie, which I thought was really cute. So the audience gets a ton of like detailed information, which I'm super big fan of, because the more I understand about the game world, the more I feel invested in it. The more I feel like I can roll a character in this story, the happier I am, because that's what I love about LitRPG. I I want to feel like I can play this game. I want to feel like I could, like, this is interesting enough that I want to like play it on my PC or play it on my controller, or like just jump into VR and play it myself. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I love about the genre, is that any novel that can kind of make you wish that this was a real game is probably good. And this novel kind of does it for me. In the respect that there's enough information that I want to roll my own character here. So, and I can very quickly, like within the first 3-4 pages, so much cool information that, you know, there you go. So there you go. After the main character finishes creating the character, he really does just jump into like all the adventure stuff that the description talked about. He's questing, he's crafting, he's venturing, he's going from squire to knight, figuring out his powers, goes on like these little adventures. And it's very much kind of like a slice of life novel, where most of the novel is the main character going on various adventures and having killing stuff and getting upgrades and getting levels and deciding where he's going to put his skill points, and what kind of character he's going to create. Is he going to be like a paladin or a priest or a mage or whatever the case is, and seeing how he develops his crafting skills as a unique aspect to his character of a knight. I do have to say that the Camelot theme to the story kind of adds a bit of flavor, but it's not so much attached to like official Camelot storylines that it kind of ruins the story in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't like encroach in the main character's ability to play however he wants. But it's just like, oh, occasional references to Arthur or some other knight or like the evil coming into the game, whatever. There are some minor kind of Christian references, like saints in the church and whatever, like they're mentioned, game plot points, like, oh, we have to go save the saint of whatever, or, you know, help him defeat the evil werewolves who are going to try to, you know, destroy the church and the town, whatever. But they're mostly historical. They're not really like religiously oriented, but they do exist. And so some people might find it objectionable. But however, the comments are super crunchy. There's literally tons of numbers and explanations like how combat works and what skills work with whatever, and how, you know, defense works with attack, you know, all kinds of cool stuff. However, the novel just doesn't take itself too seriously. Like, this is really just kind of a fun time adventure story. The dialogue between like the main character and Azal, and eventually like the talking other animals it gets, it's very humorous and it's very satirical. The novel makes fun of RPGs, it makes fun of video games, and even like pop culture references. So it's very happy to be satirical in some respects, especially towards the beginning. So I had a really good time reading it. There is like a larger theme of like beating the evil bad guys, but that happens at the end. And even then, you know, it's not like super serious, but there was like, again, good crafting in the novel. There's eventually good town building, again, towards like the middle and towards of the novel. And I had a really good time reading it. Again, it's not super serious. And it was kind of nice that it wasn't. I'm really okay with personally like a daily adventures of the good guy, or like a slice of life kind of story. And this is it. And I had a good time reading it. There we go. It gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. So there you go. Okay, it's it, everybody. We're finished. That was the last review. Thank you very much for listening and watching, folks. Remember, you can follow the podcast, LitRPG Podcast, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Patreon. If you enjoyed the podcast, you want to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can always find out all the ways you do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. So there you go. Thanks for hanging out with me, ladies and gentlemen. It's, you know, always a long week, and there were a ton of novels. I gotta say, 11 is kind of a lot for me. I'm really looking forward to next week when there's like 5 or like 6 or 7, whatever it is, whatever happens to pop up next week, which I'm sure they're going to be more. But like 11, 12 is kind of pushing my limit. And I really had to work hard to get them all. But I always love the genre so much, and I love you folks who are watching and listening. And I enjoy talking about this thing LitRPG so much that it's just, you know, it's still happy and enjoyable for me. But I definitely appreciate you also taking the time to watch me kind of nerd out and geek out about this stuff. So thanks for hanging out with me in my house while I do this. So until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody. Oh, delicious tea. Nectar of the gods. Where have you been all my life? Okay, back to the show. Okay.